Single dad gave his only umbrella away and got a call from a billionaire. The rain had been falling all afternoon, but it wasn't until Daniel Mercer stepped out of the building that he realized his shoes were already soaked. The wind bit through his threadbare jacket, and the umbrella he clutched in his hand was the only thing standing between him and the gray torrent pouring from the sky. He glanced at his watch, 5:47 p.m. If he hurried, he'd catch the last bus to the daycare. If not, Lily would be the last one waiting again, clutching her purple backpack and trying not to cry. Daniel hated that thought. He shifted his umbrella to one hand and began to jog down the sidewalk. But then he saw her, a woman standing alone on the corner, no coat, no umbrella, shielding herself from the rain with her bare hands. Her dark hair stuck to her cheeks. Her suitcase leather, expensive-looking, sat at her feet. She looked lost, not just in direction, but in the way people looked when they had nowhere they wanted to go. Daniel didn't think. He slowed. He stopped. "Are you okay?" he asked. She looked up, startled, her voice barely a whisper. "It's fine. I didn't expect the rain." He hesitated only a second. Then he did something he couldn't explain even to himself. He handed her the umbrella. "Here," he said. "You need it more." She blinked at him. "You don't even know me," he offered, a tired smile. "Doesn't matter. You're someone. That's enough." Before she could reply, he was gone, running through the downpour, soaked to the bone. He missed the bus, and Lily was the last one again. That night, Daniel coughed into his pillow, exhaustion heavy in his bones. He didn't regret it, but part of him wondered what it said about him, that he'd given up the only shield he had left in a storm. The next morning, his phone buzzed with a strange unknown number. He answered, voice groggy. "Hello," a smooth voice replied, quiet but clear. "Mr. Mercer, my name is Celia Tran. I believe you gave me your umbrella yesterday. I'd like to return it and offer something in return. Do you have time to talk?" Daniel sat up, because the woman with the soaked suitcase was a billionaire. The next morning came too soon. Daniel's socks squished in his shoes as he walked Lily to school under a gray sky that still threatened more rain. His jacket, still damp from yesterday, clung to his arms like cold paper. The soles of his shoes were separating at the edges, and every step made a soft, wet sound that echoed louder than he liked. Lily, on the other hand, bounced beside him. Her little boots made a delightful splashing sound every time she found a puddle, and her pigtails bobbed as she told him about her dream, something involving flying toast and a dancing raccoon. Daniel smiled listening, but his mind was elsewhere. Bills, rent, that extra shift he had to ask for at the garage, and the umbrella. He hadn't meant to give it away. It had just happened. The look on that woman's face, cold, startled, and far from home, had reminded him too much of how he'd felt the day Claire left. The day he became the only person Lily had left. Sometimes kindness came without thought, and sometimes he thought bitterly it came at a cost. He glanced down at Lily. Her bright pink coat had a missing button and a chocolate stain from yesterday's snack. Her backpack was a little too big for her frame, and yet she carried it proudly humming. That was why he did it. Why he always would, even if it meant going without. Even if it meant coming home soaked to a drafty apartment, coughing into silence while she slept. Even if it meant standing in wet shoes and smiling like everything was fine. When they reached the school gates, Lily tugged his sleeve. "Daddy," she asked. "Yeah, Bug. Are we okay?" Her voice was small, uncertain. Daniel crouched down and looked into her eyes. He wanted to tell her the truth that he didn't know, that every day felt like balancing on the edge of something breaking. But instead, he touched her cheek and smiled. "We're better than okay," he whispered. "We've got each other." She beamed, then ran off to the playground, boots squeaking on the rubber mat. Daniel stood there for a while, watching her blend into the sea of color and noise. Then he turned hands in his pockets and walked back toward another long day at the garage, one more shift closer to maybe being able to breathe. He didn't know that his phone, still silent in his back pocket, was about to ring. And when it did, it wouldn't be another missed call from a debt collector. It would be the woman from the storm, and everything was about to change. That night, after a day that stretched longer than it should have, Daniel was sitting on the frayed couch in their tiny apartment, unlacing his boots. His socks were still damp. The heater rattled behind him like it was trying to stay awake. And in the corner, Lily sat cross-legged on the floor, carefully coloring a picture of a cat in a princess dress. Crayons were scattered everywhere. Her tongue poked out in concentration. Daniel watched her for a moment, how focused she was, how the world didn't worry her yet, and felt both grateful and guilty. He wanted to keep it that way for as long as he could. "Daddy?" she said, not looking up. "Yeah, bug?" She kept coloring, her little fingers gripping a blue crayon. "Why don't we have two umbrellas?" He blinked. The question was so simple, so innocent that it caught him off guard. He swallowed, unsure of what to say. "Well," he started slowly, "we had one, but I gave it away." She finally looked up, curious. "Why?" He paused. He wanted to say because it was the right thing to do. He wanted to say because the woman looked like she needed it more. He wanted to say because that's who I want you to be too, Lily. Instead, he said softly, because someone needed help. Lily thought for a second, nodding like she was working it out in her mind. Was she crying? She asked. "No," Daniel said. But she looked like she wanted to. That made her go quiet. Then after a moment, she asked, "Do you think she's okay now?" Daniel smiled faintly. "I hope so." She stared at him with those big brown eyes that always made him feel like she saw more than she let on. "Maybe someone will help you next," she said. Daniel chuckled, ruffling her hair. Maybe. But he didn't believe it. Not really. Kindness like that didn't always circle back around. Still later that night, after Lily had fallen asleep on his chest and he'd carried her gently to her small bed, he stood by the window and stared out at the city, wet streets glistening under flickering lamps. He remembered the woman's face. He remembered her silence. And he wondered where she was now, dry, warm, safe. He didn't expect an answer. So when his phone buzzed the next morning with a strange, unknown number flashing across the screen, he almost didn't pick up. But then he thought of Lily's words. "Maybe someone will help you next." And this time he answered. The call came just after 8 a.m. as Daniel was packing Lily's lunch peanut butter on toast, apple slices, and a note folded into the side pocket of her lunchbox that simply read, "You are brave." He saw the number flash on his phone again. Unknown. Same one from last night. He hesitated, then answered. "Hello." A pause. Then a calm, steady voice, Mr. Mercer speaking. "This is Celia Tran. I believe we met yesterday." "Briefly. You gave me your umbrella." Daniel straightened instinctively, his grip tightening on the edge of the counter. I remember. I found your name from the daycare sticker on your daughter's backpack." "I hope that's all right." He laughed just a little. "It's okay. I forget it's there, honestly. Helps when she leaves it at the bus stop." Another pause. "I've been trying to reach you. I was hoping I could return your umbrella in person. And thank you. You don't have to," he said quickly. "It wasn't much. It was to me." Her voice was soft now, not corporate, not commanding, just real. Daniel cleared his throat, unsure what else to say. "You caught me off guard. I tend to do that," she replied, a smile just audible in her tone. "Would you have time for coffee today?" "Somewhere public, neutral, just 5 minutes." Daniel looked over at Lily, who was now dancing in her socks, singing a song to herself and her stuffed rabbit. "I work a shift at the garage until 5. He'll send a car. Meet me after. Anywhere you choose." He rubbed his temples, still unsure if this was real. "All right," he said. "There's a coffee place across from City Park. I usually stop there after work." "We'll see you there," she said. "And Daniel, thank you again for not just seeing me but stopping." Before he could reply, the line clicked. Hours later, as he stood at the auto shop, wiping grease from his hands, his mind drifted again to her. The woman with the dark hair and no coat. She hadn't seemed fragile, but she hadn't seemed okay either. There had been something about her eyes, like she'd seen too much, too fast, and didn't know what to do with it anymore. He didn't know who she really was. Not yet. But he was about to find out. And the truth would change everything. The cafe across from City Park was nothing special. The paint on the windows was chipped, and the bell over the door jingled like it hadn't been oiled since the 90s. But the coffee was warm, the booths were soft, and most importantly, nobody rushed you to leave. Daniel wiped his hands on his jeans one more time before pushing open the door. He still had grease under his nails, and his sweatshirt smelled faintly of engine oil. He hoped she wouldn't mind. But when he saw her seated in the back corner booth, wrapped in a sleek gray coat, nursing a cup of tea, he froze. She didn't look like a stranger in the rain anymore. She looked like someone who belonged on a magazine cover. Elegant, composed, controlled. And yet, when she looked up and saw him, her face lit up with something that felt real. "Daniel," she said, standing. He gave a shy nod and slid into the booth across from her. "I almost didn't recognize you," he admitted. She smiled faintly. "I get that a lot, when I'm not soaked." They both laughed, and for a moment the awkwardness melted. A server brought him a black coffee. Celia folded her hands around her tea. "I wanted to thank you," she began. "You didn't know me, you still don't, and yet you stopped." He shrugged. "You look like you needed someone to." Her eyes softened. "I did." They were quiet for a moment, the calf noise filling in the space. Then she leaned forward slightly. "I should tell you who I am. Not just my name." He raised an eyebrow. "All right." She took a breath like she'd practiced this a dozen times. "My name is Celia Wren. I run a foundation, Wren Global. It funds infrastructure projects, schools, women's shelters, sustainability initiatives. We're based in the city, but we have global reach." Daniel blinked. "And you were walking around with a suitcase in the rain?" She gave a small, tired laugh. "Sometimes I disappear, just for a few hours. No security, no assistant, no driver. It's the only time I get to feel human. And yesterday, I just walked out of a boardroom where half the people didn't care about the women they were supposed to be protecting. I left. No coat, no plan. Just wanted to feel the air on my face." Daniel sipped his coffee, taking her in, not the logo or the headlines, but the woman. "You look like you didn't want to be seen," he said. "I didn't," she replied. "But then someone saw me anyway and gave me their only umbrella." Daniel looked down, embarrassed. "I couldn't do much. You did enough." She reached into her bag and pulled out something. A small wrapped bundle, his old beaten-up umbrella now clean and carefully folded. He laughed. "You didn't have to return it. It wasn't about the umbrella," she said. "It was about what it meant." He tilted his head. "And what did it mean?" She held his gaze. "That you still exist. People like you. Kindness like that. And I'd like to offer you something in return." Daniel sat back, suddenly cautious. What kind of offer? But Celia wasn't selling anything. She wasn't offering pity or charity. She was offering a door. And behind that door was everything Daniel never let himself hope for. The next morning greeted Daniel with another sky full of rain. Of course. He stood at the kitchen window, sipping instant coffee, watching rivulets stream down the glass like the sky itself was trying to cry quietly. His boots were still damp from yesterday, his coat too thin, and the umbrella Celia had returned, still sitting untouched on the counter like some sort of quiet symbol. He hadn't told Lily about the meeting at the cafe. Not yet. She was sitting at the table, swinging her legs and munching cereal while drawing something with a pink marker. Her usual 3 stick figures under the smiling sun. He smiled at her absent-mindedly, but his mind was elsewhere, on Celia's words. "I want to help you build something, not just hand you something." She had offered a grant seed funding mentorship and a business plan consultant if he was willing to take the leap. A real auto shop, his own. But he didn't say yes, not yet, because people like him didn't get second chances from women like her. And even if they did, they didn't last. He grabbed his bag, called to Lily, and they were out the door into the rain. No umbrella this time either, because once again, someone else needed it more. Halfway to the bus stop, he realized he forgot Lily's lunch on the kitchen counter. She didn't say anything. She just held his hand tighter. By the time he dropped her off and made it to the garage, his shirt clung to his back, his shoes sloshed again, and Pete, the manager, was glaring at him from the office window. Late. Again. Inside, the usual scent of oil and rubber greeted him like a slap. Pete didn't say anything as Daniel clocked in, but the tension was thick. There'd be words later, maybe worse. But right now, Daniel didn't care. Because as he slid under the old pickup on Bay 3 wrench in hand and water dripping from his sleeves, he remembered something Celia had said the night before: most people want to be rescued. You just wanted to help. It stuck with him. Maybe he was allowed to be more than someone surviving. Maybe he could be someone building something. And even though the rain hadn't stopped, Daniel felt something different in the storm. A reason to keep going. Daniel didn't mean to miss the interview. He'd circled the date on the calendar in red ink. He'd even ironed his one good shirt the night before and rehearsed what he'd say in the mirror. Thank you for this opportunity. Am grateful and am ready. Celia had set everything up. A meeting with a small business incubator she funded where he could present his idea for a community-friendly auto shop, part garage, part mentorship space for struggling dads like himself. She believed in him. That thought alone both inspired and terrified him. But at 9:10 a.m., while Daniel was halfway to the office building in borrowed dress shoes and a folder tucked under his arm, his phone rang. Lily's school. And in less than a minute, everything shifted. She had a fever, a bad one. He rushed to the school, forgot to call the office, forgot the folder, forgot everything except a small girl in the nurse's room with flushed cheeks and glassy eyes. Daddy, she murmured when he lifted her. I've got you, bug, he whispered. He carried her home in his arms through the pouring rain. No umbrella, no coat, just her wrapped in a sweater. The elevator in their apartment was broken again, so he climbed the stairs, slowly holding her close, whispering lullabies from when she was still in diapers. By the time she was in bed, tucked beneath 3 blankets, with cool cloths on her forehead and a bowl nearby, it was past noon. The meeting had been at 10. He didn't even check his phone until hours later. 3 missed calls, 1 from Celia, 2 from her assistant, no angry text, no judgment, just one message: I hope Lily is okay. Let me know if you're both safe. We'll figure it out the rest later. Daniel stared at the screen. No frustration, no shame, just understanding. And that, more than anything, undid him. He sat beside Lily's bed and held her tiny hand as she slept, fever still clinging, but easing. The missed opportunity stung, but the girl in the bed reminded him what mattered more. He hadn't failed. He'd chosen. And maybe, just maybe, Celia would still be there when the rain stopped. It was past midnight when Daniel finally had a moment to breathe. Lily had fallen asleep with her head against his chest, her fever breaking slowly. He didn't move for over an hour, just listened to her breathe, counted each tiny rise and fall of her chest, and let the weight of the day settle in his bones. Only after she was safely tucked in did he finally check his phone again. 7 unread texts, 3 missed calls. But it was the voicemail that caught his eye. Time stamp it from earlier that evening. Celia Wren. He hesitated. Part of him didn't want to hear disappointment in her voice. He had nothing left in him to carry that too. But still, he tapped play. Her voice came through the speaker, soft and deliberate. Daniel, hi. I know things didn't go as planned today. But I also know, because I've learned real life doesn't run on our schedules. She paused. You made the right choice. I don't need to hear the details. You were where you needed to be. Daniel exhaled, sinking deeper into the couch. His throat tightened. You're not just the guy who gave away an umbrella. You're the guy who shows up when it's hard. And that's the person I want to work with. Another pause, longer this time. So if you still want this, call me back. We'll set another meeting. You haven't lost anything. Click. The message ended, and Daniel sat in silence. It wasn't the kind of message he expected from a billionaire. No pretense, no blame, just grace. He stood up, grabbed a pen, and jotted something down on the back of an overdue electric bill. Call her tomorrow. Try again. Then he checked on Lily, kissed her forehead, and finally, let himself believe something he hadn't in years. Maybe second chances were real. The rain had stopped by morning, but the air still smelled of it, fresh and a little sad. Daniel stood outside the same cafe across from City Park, clutching the umbrella Celia had returned to him. Not because he expected more rain, but because it reminded him of the moment everything started. He was early. He hadn't been early for anything in a long time. The glass door jingled as he stepped inside. She was already there this time, no coat today, no umbrella. Just a navy blazer, jeans, and that same quiet presence. She looked up and smiled. Hi, she said. Daniel offered a nod, his fingers tightening briefly around the umbrella handle. Hi. They sat. He didn't touch his coffee. I'm sorry I missed the meeting, he began quickly. Lily had a fever and Celia held up a hand gently. You don't have to explain. Daniel's mouth opened, then closed. She meant it. I left you a message, she added. I listened, he said. Twice, her smile widened just a bit, eyes softer now. So why did you come today? He looked at her then, fully, no headlines, no polished image. Just a woman who hadn't asked questions that first rainy night, only noticed that he'd stopped. And he said the truth, because you helped me yesterday, and I want to be someone who doesn't run when the help is returned. That made her go quiet for a moment. Then she said, you helped me yesterday too. He blinked. I gave you an umbrella. You reminded me I wasn't invisible, she said, that I could still be human. Daniel leaned back surprised. He never thought of himself as someone who could offer that. They talked longer this time, about cars, about parenting, about boardrooms and broken elevators and being tired all the time but showing up anyway, about what kind of auto shop he'd build if he had the chance, not just a repair place, but one with space for single parents to learn skills, a playroom, so kids could come along and maybe even weekend classes. I don't want it to just be mine, he said. I want it to mean something. Celia looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. That's exactly the kind of business I invest in. Daniel let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. This wasn't just a conversation anymore. This was the beginning. It was the black car that made his neighbors whisper. It pulled up quietly sleek and tinted the kind of vehicle no one on Daniel Street had ever ridden inlet alone had waiting outside their building. Daniel spotted it from the third-floor window as he was tying Lily's shoes. She leaned over the sill and gasped. Is that a limo, she asked. Sort of, Daniel said. Not really sure. It's just a nice car. Lily grinned. Do we get to ride in it? He paused. No, kiddo. It's not for us, but it was. A knock came at the door before he could blink. He opened it to find a woman in a black pantsuit, mid-40s, silver streak in her hair, calm eyes like shed-handled people far more intimidating than him. Mr. Daniel Hart, she asked. Yeah, she smiled politely. Ms. Wren sent me. I'm her director of outreach. His eyebrows lifted. Okay. She asked me to help you with the application paperwork for the grant zoning requirements for the garage space you're considering, and a few other things. The woman stepped aside and gestured to the sleek black car. Behind the window he saw another woman. Blonde, elegant. Celia. She gave a small wave. Daniel blinked. The woman in front of him, her name tag read Elena, continued. She said you might be too proud to let her help directly, so she's sending me instead. Daniel chuckled. She's not wrong. You're not the first person she's helped who didn't want to be helped, Elena added with a knowing smile. Lily tugged on his hand. Daddy, are you going to be famous? He laughed, scooping her up. No bug, just busy. He turned to Elena. Give me 10 minutes. I'll meet you downstairs. Take your time, she said. This isn't a rush. It's a beginning. Daniel shut the door, still in a daze. Daddy, Lily said as he set her down. You have that face again. What face? The one when your heart is loud. He laughed, ruffled her curls, and whispered, "That's because something big might be starting." He wasn't wrong. Outside, the woman in the black car waited, and so did a future Daniel never thought he'd be allowed to have. Daniel had never been past the lobby of Wren Tower before. Had seen it plenty of times, usually while delivering parts or driving past on his bus route. It was a column of glass and steel that shimmered like something from another world. He used to tell Lily that superheroes probably lived up there. Now he was holding a visitor's badge with his name printed on it. Elena had arranged everything. "Celia would like to speak with you personally," she said. "Lunch, casual. Top floor, casual." Right. Daniel glanced at his reflection in the mirrored elevator doors. His shirt was clean. His boots were scuffed. He'd shaved. That would have to do. The elevator dinged softly as it reached the top floor. The doors opened to sunlight. Floor-to-ceiling windows flooded the room with golden light. A long terrace stretched beyond the glass, dotted with plants, soft chairs, and at the very edge, Celia looking out over the city with a cup of tea in her hands. She turned when she heard his footsteps. "You came," she said, smiling. Daniel offered a half shrug. "I was promised food." She laughed. "Then I won't disappoint you." Lunch was already waiting on a small round table near the terrace edge. Roasted chicken sandwiches, lemon tea, and a plate of cookies. Lily would have loved. They ate, talked, laughed even. This time the conversation didn't feel like business. It felt like something more personal. Two people who had stumbled into each other's lives by accident, and now neither of them could quite walk away. Celia leaned forward at one point, eyes curious. "You know, when you handed me that umbrella, you didn't ask for anything. Not even my name." Daniel nodded. "I didn't think you'd remember me. I couldn't forget," she said softly. He looked at her, really looked at, and saw someone more than the headlines. Someone tired, someone hopeful, someone brave in a way people didn't write about. "I was invisible," before she added, "That day in the rain, you didn't look past me." Daniel swallowed. "I know how that feels." The silence between them stretched, comfortable now, not awkward. After a moment, Celia reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. "These are the partnership documents. If you're ready, I'll fund the first 6 months equipment space admin help. No strings, just faith." Daniel stared at the folder. It didn't seem real. Then he looked up at her. "What if I fail?" he asked quietly. She tilted her head. "What if you don't?" The wind picked up slightly. He felt it stir a ting in him that had been still too long. That afternoon, Daniel left the tower with the signed agreement tucked under his arm and something even greater in his chest, the quiet, undeniable feeling that his life had just changed. Daniel was filling out paperwork at the kitchen table that night, business license applications vendor, contacts and insurance form that might as well have been written in another language, when Lily looked up from coloring on the floor. "Daddy," she asked, "what's her name again?" "The umbrella lady." He paused, pen in midair. "Celia," he said. "Celia what?" He hesitated again. For weeks, she'd just been Celia to him. Like Madonna. Or Cher. A single name with enough weight to stand on its own. He never really questioned it, didn't need to. But now Daniel pulled out the folder she'd given him at lunch. He turned to the first page of the partnership agreement. There in crisp serif letters, Celia Adrian Wren, Wren Holdings International Chair, Wren Foundation Net Worth Don't Even Ask. He let out a low whistle. He had Googled her once, briefly, but he hadn't cared to look deeper. Now the truth sat in ink in front of him. She didn't just work at Wren Tower, she owned it. She wasn't just generous, she was powerful, and yet she still knocked on his apartment door in the rain, still sat on his broken kitchen stool, sipping lukewarm coffee and listening to his dreams. Lily climbed onto his lap, peering at the paper. "She has a pretty name," she said. "Yeah," Daniel replied, distracted. "She really does. Are you going to marry her?" Lily asked suddenly, completely serious. Daniel choked on air. What Lily giggled and hopped off his lap, dancing away before he could answer. But the question lingered. because something had shifted lately. Something soft, quiet, not spoken out loud, but present all the same. In the way Celia looked at him, the way he caught himself looking back, not with awe, with understanding. That night, Daniel sat back in his chair, surrounded by forms and crayons, thinking about Celia, Adrienne Renat. The name, not the wealth, but the woman who'd stood in the rain without a coat and smiled when he handed her his only umbrella. He wondered how many people ever really saw her. He wondered if he had. And something in his chest, something careful and cautious, began to open like a window finally unlocked. Daniel had never ridden in a private elevator before. It was silent, no music, no ads, just smooth steel walls and a soft hum that felt more like a whisper than movement. A gold-etched panel glowed with the number PH Penthouse. He held a leather folder in one hand, blueprints and rough sketches tucked inside. The elevator ride should have been nerve-wracking, but oddly it wasn't, because he wasn't here to impress anymore. He was here to build something real. The door slid open. Celia was already waiting in the foyer, barefoot of all things, her heels discarded neatly by the door, a glass of water in her hand. The penthouse behind her was modern and open, but it wasn't cold. Plants, books, a couch with a blanket tossed across it. Human. "Hey," she said, as if this were normal, as if single dads and second-hand jackets came to billionaires' penthouses every day. "Hey," he replied, stepping in. She motioned toward the dining table, cleared and ready. "Let's see what you've got." Daniel spread the papers out carefully. His hands were calloused, his sketches a little messy, but they had heart. The kind of diagrams made at 1 a.m. after putting a kid to bed. Notes scribbled in the margins. Circles around things like child-friendly and low-cost repairs for struggling families. Celia stood beside him, scanning each page without interrupting. She was quiet for a long time. Finally, she looked at him and said, "You didn't design a garage." He blinked. "I didn't." She tapped a page with her fingernail. "You designed a haven." Daniel swallowed. "I just thought about what I wish it had. When Lily was a baby, when I was figuring things out alone." "That's exactly why it matters," Celia said. He looked up, and this time it wasn't the CEO in her eyes. It was the woman who'd sat across from him on a rainy curb, the one who'd asked for nothing but shelter from the storm. "I've had people pitch ideas with tech and polish and 10-year projections," she said, "but none of them ever showed me hope on a blueprint." Daniel didn't know what to say, so he didn't. He just nodded, heart too full for words. Celia turned and walked toward the kitchen. "Now come on, I made pasta. The least I can do is feed the man who's going to change the city one oil change at a time." Daniel laughed, the sound echoing warmly in the penthouse air. And as the sun dipped behind the skyline, casting long golden streaks across the glass, the private elevator doors slid shut behind him. But Daniel didn't need them to leave, because he wasn't going anywhere. Not now, not when everything was finally beginning. The pasta was simple, just garlic, olive oil, and fresh herbs. But it was perfect. And the kitchen was quiet in that warm, late evening way, like the world had exhaled and finally allowed itself to rest. Daniel sat at the marble counter with a half-empty bowl in front of him, one elbow on the table, fingers curled around a water glass. Celia moved with quiet ease, pouring wine white for her water for him, and joining him again. "So," she said softly, "can I tell you something I didn't say that night?" He raised an eyebrow. "The night you gave me your umbrella." Daniel smiled a little. "Sure." She leaned back in her chair. "I was on my way to leave." "Leave what?" She stared at her glass for a moment, then lifted her eyes to meet his. "Everything. My position, my name, the company. I had a bag packed in the back seat. A burner phone. I wasn't just taking a walk, I was disappearing." The words stunned him. "You were running away." "Yes," she said, almost like a confession. And then this man, drenched, tired, holding a broken umbrella, handed it to me and said, "Looks like you need this more than I do." Daniel's throat tightened. "You didn't know who I was." Celia continued, "You didn't stop to ask. You didn't look at me like I was supposed to matter. You just saw a stranger getting soaked." He swallowed. "It's what anyone would have done." "No, Daniel," she said, voice low. "That's the thing. It's not." She leaned forward now, her hand brushing close to his on the counter. "You gave without knowing, without expecting. And it stopped me. It reminded me that the world still had people who didn't want anything from me, that I didn't need to run." Silence bloomed between them again. "Not awkward, sacred. I turned the car around that night," she added, "because of you." Daniel looked at her, really looked, not the CEO, not the billionaire, just Celia, tired, strong, grateful. "I think," he said carefully, "we both gave something to each other without realizing it." Her eyes shone. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the umbrella, still slightly bent, still faintly damp at the edges. He set it on the counter between them. "I think this thing might be magic," he joked gently. Celia laughed, and it wasn't the practiced, polite kind. It was real. She picked up the umbrella and ran her thumb along its handle. "It is," she said softly, "but not because of the umbrella." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "It's magic because of you." The ribbon-cutting ceremony was still 2 weeks away, but the garage already buzzed with life. The front sign wasn't up yet, but inside, Daniel and Lily had painted one of the back walls together. Handprints in bright red and yellow, her idea. A small corner had books and blocks, a kid zone for parents who had nowhere else to go while their car was being fixed. Daniel had thought of everything he'd once needed and never had, and now it was real. But he wasn't prepared for what Celia brought that afternoon. She arrived not in a black car this time, but walking casually with coffee in hand, in a thin manila folder tucked beneath her arm. Daniel wiped his hands on a rag when she entered. "You're just in time to witness me losing a battle with a rusted exhaust system," he joked. Celia smirked. "Then he'll make this quick." She handed him the folder. He opened it and paused. Inside was a formal document. Simple, clean, letterhead that read Wren Family Foundation, Strategic Partner Proposal. Daniel looked up stunned. "I want to fund 5 more garages," she said, "just like this one. One in each borough, different neighborhoods, same model, affordable repairs, mentoring programs, family resources. You'll lead it." His voice caught. "Celia, this is huge," she nodded. "It is, but it works. You've made something that matters. I just want to help you scale it." Daniel stared at the page. His name was already listed at the top, Director of Community Development. A salary, a benefits package, resources, stability, and something else even rarer, trust. "Why me?" he asked softly. Celia tilted her head. "Because when I had nothing to offer, you gave me kindness. When I wanted to disappear, you gave me shelter. And when I wanted to believe people only cared about what I had, you reminded me who I was." He looked at the folder again, then at her. "Say yes," she whispered. He didn't speak. He just reached across the table and shook her hand, strong, certain, honest. But then Lily burst into the room holding up 2 greasy cookies from a batch someone had dropped off earlier. "Daddy, Miss Celia want cookies covered in mystery flavor." They both laughed. And just like that, the gravity of the moment softened into something else, something even more powerful: family. The garage was quiet for once. The tools were lined up. The floor swept clean. Lily's chalk drawing still decorated the back wall. Rainbows, hearts, and one lopsided doodle labeled Daddy's Place. Everything was ready. And yet Daniel sat alone at the edge of the lift bay, elbows on his knees, staring at the signed proposal still sitting in the open folder. He hadn't turned it in yet. The ink was dry. The deal was real. But something inside him hesitated. It wasn't fear of the work. He'd worked hard his whole life. It wasn't fear of Celia. He trusted her more than he trusted most. It was something quieter, deeper. What if I'm not the man she thinks I am? He rubbed a grease-smudged hand down his face. The garage, this place that was becoming a haven for so many, felt suddenly bigger than him. The new offer meant stepping into the spotlight, becoming a face, a leader. But he'd always been the guy behind the scenes, the quiet worker, the one who carried umbrellas, not empires. A voice interrupted the quiet. "You gonna sit there all night or actually tell me what's in your head?" Daniel looked up. Celia stood in the doorway, her heels in her hand, her expression unreadable, but her eyes full of something warm, familiar, grounding. He didn't answer right away. She walked over, sat beside him on the edge of the bay, feet dangling like they were kids again. "I know that look," she said. "I've worn it. The night I signed my first board vote, I nearly ripped it in half. Thought I wasn't enough. Thought I didn't deserve the room I was walking into." Daniel glanced at her. "What changed?" She smiled faintly. "A janitor I barely knew said, 'You don't have to be ready, just willing.'" Daniel let that settle. The fear didn't go away, but something softened under her words. He turned the page in the folder, stared at his name. "Leading 5 locations," he whispered. "What if I fail?" Celia's voice was quiet. "Then we try again. Together." The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was honest. Lily's laughter echoed from the upstairs apartment. Daniel finally let out a breath and said, "Okay." The grand opening wasn't grand in the traditional Sensino red carpet, no flashing lights. But the garage buzzed with life. Kids chalked smiley faces on the sidewalk. A local food truck handed out sliders and lemonade. A string of hand-painted signs, done by Lily and the neighborhood children, read, "Welcome to the Fix-It Place." Celia stood to the side, watching quietly. She didn't wear heels, just jeans, a soft sweater, and her hair tucked behind one ear. Unrecognizable from the headlines that once defined her. Daniel stood at the center, shaking hands, laughing in that unfiltered way that only happens when a man forgets to be nervous. But then toward the edge of the lot, Daniel spotted someone. A man in a tailored gray suit, older, polished, out of place. Daniel froze. It was Mr. Keena's old boss, the one who'd fired him in front of Lily for being late again. The one who had looked at Daniel like a cautionary tale. For a moment, Daniel's chest tightened. The memory flared, hot, drenched shoes, missed shifts, a crying child clinging to his hand while they walked away with nothing. Mr. Keene looked around, then met Daniel's eyes. He nodded once, not smugly, not apologetically either. Just acknowledgement. Daniel nodded back. And that was it. He turned to see Lily tugging Celia's hand toward the new mural on the back wall. It was a swirl of color handprints from half the block. In the center, in Lily's blocky handwriting, "Hope lives here." Celia looked up and caught Daniel's eyes. That's when he realized the scar from losing everything, that old pain, was still there. But it no longer defined him. It had shaped him, yes, but it hadn't ended him. He walked over, scooped Lily into his arms, and stood beside Celia in front of the mural. There was no speech, no formal ribbon to cut, just people, just purpose, just the soft, quiet joy of something broken made whole again. 2 weeks after the opening, the garage was humming like a well-oiled machine. Daniel had fallen into a rhythm. Early mornings with Lily coffee brewing in the corner office. He never thought he'd have calls from city coordinators, walk-ins from locals who couldn't afford dealership prices. But today felt different, because today was the first assignment, not just a fix, but the first satellite site. Daniel stood in the small office of the Bronx location blueprints, in one hand Lily's drawing, tucked into his back pocket for courage. It was a run-down shell of a building. Rusted doors, broken floor tiles, roof leaks, but the bones were solid. He could see it, a workshop here, a reading nook there. A room where single parents could wait with their kids and feel safe, warm, seen. Celia stepped in beside him holding a tablet. The lease is ours, fully cleared. The owner was shocked someone wanted it. "I'm not," Daniel said. "Places like this just need someone to believe in them." She smiled. He turned to face her. So what do we call it? Celia thought for a moment. The other garages carry your name. But this one, this first expansion should carry the moment that started it. Daniel raised a brow. You mean the umbrella? No, she said gently. I mean you. He looked back at the dusty window where light filtered through onto the cracked floor. Then he said, let's call it First Shelter. Celia blinked. Why? He turned to her, his voice low steady. Because the first shelter I gave was that umbrella. But the first shelter I got was from you. There was a stillness between them again. And then without ceremony or permission, she stepped forward and hugged him. Tight, real, no cameras, no paperwork. Just two people who had nothing that day in the rain and had somehow built everything together. Before the ribbon cuttings, before the foundation offers, before the mural with Lily's handprints, there was one day Daniel almost walked away from it all. It was early in the process. Permits had been delayed. The plumbing at the first site had flooded. A grant Celia had fought for got denied at the last second. And Lily had a fever that week. Nothing dangerous, but enough to keep Daniel up most nights, listening to her breathe and wondering if he was failing at all of it. He hadn't told anyone how close he came, but he remembered standing outside the half-renovated garage, staring at the cracked sidewalk, thinking, what am I doing? I'm just a guy who once handed someone an umbrella. That's it. That's all I've ever been. The rain had started again, soft, cold, constant. And for a moment, he didn't move, just stood there soaked, remembering all the days he'd come home wet, laid empty-handed. Then a car had pulled up. Not Celia's, just an old sedan, beat up, familiar. A woman stepped out, mid-30s, frazzled, holding a toddler on her hip and a flyer in her hand. Her eyes scanned the front of the building, unsure. You open yet? She asked. Daniel blinked. Not officially. She looked desperate. My car's barely holding together. No one's willing to touch it unless I pay up front. And I don't even have money for the tow. He hesitated, then said, where is it? She gestured down the block. Without another word, he walked with her through the rain. Helped push the car himself. Got on his back to check the damage. Promised her nothing fancy but something safe. Something that would run. When they finished, the toddler offered him a soggy animal cracker with a grin. That night, Daniel didn't think about quitting again, because that moment reminded him what Celia had already seen. He was never just a man with an umbrella. He was someone who showed up even when everything felt like it was falling apart. And maybe, just maybe, that was the rarest kind of wealth. It arrived folded inside a crayon-covered envelope, slipped under Celia's office door during one quiet afternoon. She was in the middle of reviewing blueprints when she noticed the soft scrape of paper across the floor. No one knocked. No one called her name. She picked it up and recognized the handwriting on the front right away. To Miss Celia, the lady in black, from the rain. Celia smiled. Inside was a single sheet of notebook paper torn on one edge, written in purple marker and peppered with misspellings. But every word felt like gold. Dear Miss Celia, hi. It's me, Lily. I'm the girl who gave you Daddy's blanket on the couch when you look like a wet cat. I'm writing this letter because Daddy says it's good to say thank you, and I think you're brave and kind. Daddy gave you his umbrella, and then you gave him a whole garage. That's like a trade, but way cooler. At first, I thought you were a secret spy because you wore black and didn't smile. But now I think maybe you're a superhero like the ones who help people without flying. My daddy is one too. He just doesn't know it yet. You helped him believe in stuff again, not the big stuff like buildings or money or new shirts. I mean the stuff like us, like pancakes and picking me up from school on time and letting me paint the back wall. If you ever feel sad again, remember that you were the reason Daddy didn't quit. He told me once that the best kind of rich is knowing you made someone else brave. So you're really, really rich. Love, Lily Mercer, age 7 3/4 P.S. If you want pancakes again, we have extra syrup. Celia didn't realize she was crying until one of the tears splashed the edge of the paper. She folded it carefully, pressed it to her chest, and whispered, "Thank you, Lily. Not for the letter, but for reminding her that some things change the world quietly. One umbrella, one couch, one little girl with too much syrup, and a heart big enough to carry two lives forward." It rained again. Not the stormy, sideways kind that soaks you to the bone and hides tears. Just a quiet, steady drizzle, the kind that turns the streets glossy and slows the city down. Daniel stood outside the garage, now painted a cheerful shade of blue with white trim. The first shelter sign above the door gleamed even in the gray. A group of kids huddled under the awning, giggling, daring each other to step into puddles. He looked down at the umbrella in his hand. The umbrella, the same one he had given away that day in the cold, never expecting to see it again. Celia had returned it last week, repaired, polished, wrapped in a ribbon with a note attached. "You gave shelter when I didn't know I needed it. Let this remind you, small kindness can echo louder than thunder." See, he hadn't opened it since. Not because he didn't need it, but because the rain didn't feel the same anymore. Behind him, the garage hummed with new life. There were mechanics on the floor, two young dads in training, and an elderly man fixing coffee in the new waiting room. Lily came bounding out the side door. Her rain boots mismatched her pink umbrella, shaped like a ladybug. "Daddy!" she shouted, jumping into a puddle that sprayed his jeans. "You're gonna get soaked." He smiled. "I know. You forgot your umbrella again," she scolded, waving hers at him like a sword. He crouched down beside her, resting a hand on her shoulder. "I didn't forget. I just don't mind getting wet sometimes." She scrunched her nose. "You're weird." "Probably." Celia appeared a moment later under her own umbrella, this one sleek black elegant. But she didn't stay beneath it long. She lowered it and stepped beside them, letting the rain pepper her shoulders. "I thought you hated the rain," Daniel said. "I did," she replied, "until I realized it brought me exactly where I needed to be." He looked at her, then at Lily, who had now begun jumping between puddles like it was a personal quest. Rain once meant lost jobs, cold nights, disappointment. But today, it meant growth, fresh starts, life. Daniel finally opened the umbrella. Not to hide, but to hold it above someone else. Celia smiled as he tilted it over her and Lily, then stepped closer. And just like that, in the middle of a quiet afternoon beneath soft rain and laughter and second chances, it all felt exactly right. It wasn't fancy, not steel and glass, not modern or sharp, or the kind that got featured in glossy magazines. But it was sturdy, it was safe, and it was theirs. Daniel stood beside the contractor as the final sheet of corrugated metal was bolted into place on the expanded side of the garage. For the first time, the work area wouldn't flood during storms. The volunteers wouldn't have to cover tools with tarps. The kids wouldn't have to run from drips. The garage finally had a roof. Celia arrived just as the last bolt went in. She wore her usual jeans and blazer, but there was paint on her fingers. She had been helping Lily finish a mural in the back. "No more leaks," Daniel said, looking up. "No more excuses," she replied with a grin. They both laughed. It had taken months to get hair permits funding compromises. At one point, they'd had to choose between roofing material and a new heating system. Daniel had almost picked the heater, but Celia had quietly shifted some funds from her personal account and said, "Get both." He never forgot that. Inside the garage buzzed. Lily had organized an art wall. Local teenagers were learning to do oil changes. A tired mom sat in the waiting corner, sipping the free coffee while her toddler played with donated blocks. And outside, a crowd began to gather. Neighbors, friends, people who remembered the old building and wanted to see what it had become. Daniel climbed a small step stool and looked out over them all. "I don't have a speech." He began, his voice carrying more from warmth than volume. "But I just wanted to say thank you." He turned, lifted his hand toward the new roof. "When we started this, we didn't have much, just a busted door, a dream, and honestly, a lot of fear. But you all kept showing up. You donated tools, you painted walls, you shared stories, and today we're standing under something solid, A pause, then not just the roof, but the community that holds it up. Celia stepped forward and placed something in his Honda small brass plaque. He read the engraving and smiled. First shelter where kindness found a home. He climbed up and screwed it into the door frame himself. Lily clapped first, then others joined. Not wild applause, but the kind that said, "We were here, we helped, we belong." And as the wind picked up gently outside, the new roof stayed strong, quiet, unmoving, just like the man who once gave away his umbrella and now had built something no storm could wash away. Long after the headlines faded and the photo shoots ended, long after the ribbon-cutting ceremonies and morning interviews, there was one name that never made it into the spotlight. Hers. Celia had every chance to step forward. She could have been the face of the new foundation, the viral success story, billionaire businesswoman rescued by kindness. There were offers, talk shows, even a book deal. She turned them all down. When the press asked for a quote, she redirected them to Daniel. When they asked for her origin story, she smiled and simply said, "This isn't about me." But behind the scenes, she was everywhere. She helped design the second location's daycare area, wrote personal letters to every single dad in the support group, created quiet scholarships under the name Umbrella Grant, even slipped new boots into Daniel's locker after she noticed his soles wearing out. Once a reporter cornered her near the community garden outside the garage. "Why won't you go public?" they asked. Celia looked toward the building where Daniel knelt beside a teenager, teaching her how to check tire pressure, and Lily ran past with paint on her overalls. And she said, "Because I already got the story I needed." Then she walked away. No flashbulbs, no headlines, just a quiet woman in black still and steady as the umbrella that started it all. Daniel never thought he'd sit behind a desk again. Not because he didn't want to, but because the world hadn't offered that kind of chair in a long, long time. So when Celia walked into the garage one late afternoon with a folder in her hand and that unreadable look in her eyes, he knew something was coming. "You've been managing the shop, mentoring the guys, organizing donations, and balancing invoices," she said, leaning against the door frame. Daniel wiped his hands on a rag. "That's kind of the job." "No," she said. "That's 3 jobs." He raised an eyebrow. "Is this your way of saying I'm fired?" She tossed the folder onto the workbench beside him. He opened it slowly. Inside was a letter with a new title, Director of Community Operations, First Shelter Foundation. Full salary, benefits, flexible schedule for parenting. Advisory seat on the board. He stared at it like it might disappear. "This isn't a favor," Celia said. "This is earned. This is leadership. And this is me making sure the man who held the umbrella gets to build a shelter with the tools and recognition he deserves." He looked up, emotion tightening his throat. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," she said, "then go home and celebrate with pancakes." He smiled, shook his head, and finally said the only word that fit, "Yes." The next morning, Daniel wore a shirt with buttons for the first time in years. Lily drew him a congratulations card with glitter glue and misspelled director as director. He kept it in his new desk drawer. And when he walked into the main office that morning, not just as a worker, but as a leader, every hand he shook felt like a second chance sealed. The man who once gave without thinking now had the power to keep giving with purpose, with strength, and with a seat at the table he never dreamed he'd reach. Daniel almost didn't answer it. His phone had buzzed just as he and Lily were racing through the rain, shoe-soaked hearts light after laughing over a spilled cocoa. He saw unknown number flashing on the screen. For a second, he nearly let it go to voicemail. Another scam, probably. Another fake offer. Another reminder of how invisible he'd become since Claire died. But something, maybe the way Lily was tugging at his sleeve, maybe the way the storm seemed to pause, made him press accept. A woman's voice spoke. Low, clear, controlled, but not cold. "Hi, I think you gave me your umbrella this morning." Daniel blinked, confused. "Sorry, what? I was the woman outside the station." You didn't wait for thanks. You just helped. He remembered her then, shivering, soaked, not even looking up when he handed her the umbrella and turned away. Didn't think you'd call, he said. I wasn't sure I would, she admitted. But then I realized people like you are hard to find. People who give without knowing who's watching. A pause. I'd like to repay the kindness. Over lunch. Tomorrow. My office. I'll send a car. He laughed nervously. This sounds like a setup. It's not, she said. It's a beginning, and it was. That call brief, unexpected, soaked in rain and hesitance, became the crack that split his old life open and let light pour in. It wasn't just a call. It was a key to a future he hadn't dared hope for, to a woman who stayed, to a place where his daughter could grow in sunlight, not fear, and to the reminder that one small act done with no agenda could change everything.